Hi there and welcome to Tech Life, a channel where I aim to review everything from selfie sticks to laptops to IDs for coding, video editing, software for producing thumbnails, essentially anything tech related. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you have anything that you think I should review, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to review that product. This is part 4 in the series of C# beginners tutorials. In this video, we're going to be looking at methods. We've already seen and used a method, namely the main method. The main method is the starting point of any C# application or program. Methods are contained within classes. Methods describe the behavior of a class. So for example, we might have a class called alarm, and that class may well have methods that allow us to set the alarm time, maybe get the alarm time that's already been set, or allow us to snooze the alarm. So these might be typical behaviors of this class. Classes also have data associated to them, and normally that data is stored within instance variables. So in this case, the alarm class may well have two instance variables, one which contains the value of the set alarm and one that contains the value of the mode of the alarm. Another example of a class might be a class called song, and that class's methods may well include being able to set the title, set the artist, play the song, maybe even stop the song playing, rewind, etc. So those would be typical behaviors of a class called song, and the data associated to that class may well include being able to store the title of the song or the artist of the song. There are two ways to use methods. The first is to declare a method, which essentially means that we create the method, and the second method is to simply invoke existing methods. So if we fire up Visual Studio, we can take a closer look at how to code up and use methods. Okay, so let's create a console app. So we're going to go to new project, and we're going to select the console application, and we're going to give this a name, and I'm going to call this methods. We do OK. Just take a second or two for Visual Studio to create a skeleton console application for us. And as soon as this is done, the first thing I'm going to do is change the theme, because I've noticed that this dark theme that I use is not so easily readable on the YouTube videos. So in order to change this dark theme, we simply go to Tools, and we go to Options, and then from here the color theme can be changed. At the moment I've got it set to dark, and I actually prefer using this when I'm coding, but obviously it's not ideal for when I'm creating these YouTube videos. So I'm going to change this theme to, I'm going to set it to blue. I think that should be okay. That's a lot lighter than this dark theme. We do okay there, and this will take a second or two to change that color. Okay, and I'm also going to zoom in slightly. It's set to 100%. I'm going to go to 150, and I think that should be a lot better in terms of being able to read the code if you're watching this on my YouTube channel. After that, we are going to we're going to delete this program.cs. And we're going to do a right click, and we're going to add, and we're going to add a new item, and the item is going to be a class, and I'm going to call this test method. Test methods. I'm just going to be testing methods. So that is a class name. In order to declare a method, we have to define a number of distinct parts to it. So a method may well have an access level. So this could be defined as a public method or a private. Typically, you might well also include a modifier. A method can be static or non-static. A method would either have a return type here, and this could be a type in terms of int, string, or one of the other types. If the method doesn't return anything, then we have to declare that method as having void in terms of returning nothing. The method would also have a name, and then a method could also have arguments that are passed into that method. So as mentioned before, all C# programs have at least one method, and that method is called the main method. So we're just going to create this main method, and I'm going to start by typing static, and then void, and then the name of the method is main, and we are not going to have any arguments. So that's our first method declared. So the main method is always declared using the static keyword, and we'll get into the difference between static and non-static objects as we add a bit more code to this application that we're developing. So firstly, I'm going to add a comment here, and we're going to say get input from the user. Oh, by the way, more often than not, you would only have one main method for your application, so one entry point for your application. There are technically, you can actually have more than one main method, but then you have to go in and define which of the main methods is going to be the startup method. So it's just cleaner just to have just the one main method. So here we've got a comment saying get input from the user, and if we come out of this, the main method here starts with these curly braces and it ends here, whereas the class begins here and then ends here. And as mentioned before, methods sit within classes, so I'm gonna create another method here, and that method is going to be called getName. So I'm going to define that as a public method. The return type is going to be string, and the name of the method is getName. And I'm going to close off this line by using the parentheses. We start the method by placing these braces, and the statements for this method will all sit within these curly braces. So the first statement that we're going to have here is I'm going to declare a variable, and it's going to be of string, and the name of the variable is name. Next I'm going to have a console dot write please enter your name. So if we have a look at this line of code here, we've said console.write, and then we've placed an argument within the parentheses. So write is a method of the class console, and console is a static class, and because console and its members are static, we don't have to instantiate, we don't have to create console by saying console cn equals new console. This will error because C# knows that console is a static class, and static classes don't have to be instantiated in order for us to be able to use their members. So all I'm saying here is, firstly, I've declared a variable and it's of type string, and now I'm prompting the user to enter a name. And I'm going to store the value that the user enters in this name variable. So I'm going to say name console. If we type in console and hit the full stop key, then it gives us a list of all the methods that the class console has available for us. So it shows us not only the methods but also properties, and the one we are interested in this instance is the read. I'm going to have the read line, open and close parentheses, and semicolon. So here basically the user is going to be prompted to enter a name, and when that user enters the name, then the value of that name is going to be stored in this variable, which is of type string. And as you can see, Visual Studio is complaining, and the reason it's complaining is because methods, if we define the method as having a return type of string, then we have to return a value which is of type string. So in order to return values from a method, we use the keyword return, and I'm going to return the value of this variable name. So what we've done here, we've declared a method. By declaring a method, we actually define what this method does. Let me just clear this up slightly. Too many spaces there. Oh, by the way, C# is totally space insensitive, so I could leave a space like that and C# wouldn't care. I could leave a space like this and again C# Visual Studio wouldn't care at all. You couldn't do something like this. You couldn't take a keyword and leave a space like that, because then that keyword is not a complete word now. So the actual word is return, and it has to read as a return. Again, similar with class names. You can't leave a space like this, because now that console class is not called console, it's called cons space. So you can't do that. But in terms of leaving spaces like this, or like this, or even things like this, all perfectly acceptable. Not probably the best thing to do, because it makes reading your code a lot more difficult, and we want to try as much as possible to make our code nice and simple to read. Okay, so at the top of this video I mentioned there's two ways to use methods. One is to declare a method and then invoke that method. So once we've declared our method, we can go ahead and invoke this now, and I'm going to invoke it in this main method. So I'm going to make a call to this method, but I'm going to call it from the main method, because if you recall, the main method is the starting point of any C# program. So in order to invoke our getName method, we have to just come up to here. We have to first instantiate the class our method sits in. Our get method is sitting in a class called test methods. Test method, the class is not a static class, and therefore we have to instantiate it. By instantiate, I mean you have to use the new keyword in order to create an instance of that class, and then once we have the instance of a class created, then we can go ahead and use that class's members. So I am going to quickly instantiate that class, and the way we do that is we use the name of the class, which in our case is test methods. Oh, I have to spell it correctly, test methods, and we are saying we're going to give this instance a name, and the name we can give it is, we'll call it greeting. Greeting, yeah, let's call it greeting, and leave a space, and then we have an equal sign, and then we use the new keyword, and then we use the name of the class again, test methods, but in this instance we add the parentheses and a semicolon. Okay, so let's look at what we've done here. We've created an instance. That instance is called greeting. Actually, I'm going to call it greetings. So we've created an instance of this class. The class is called a test method, test methods. We've created an instance of test methods by saying it's equal to new test methods. So when we use the new keyword, C# creates an instance of our class and then points this greetings reference to that instance. Once we have that reference, we can use the greetings reference accompanied with a dot to select the members of this class, and the member that we're interested in is the method that we created, and that is called getName. So we can select getName from this list, and if we hit the tab key, it will go ahead and select that. Okay, so greetings.getName will invoke this method now, and because this method doesn't have any arguments, we're not going to pass any values into this invocation. So I can use a parenthesis and a semicolon. Okay, so let me recap. First, we declared our method, which means we described what our method is going to do. Once we have a declaration of our method, then we can invoke our method by first instantiating the class that it sits in, and then using this dot notation in order to pick up the method that we require. I'm going to make a slight change to this by firstly adding a couple of variables here. So they're going to be string, and the first one is going to be called name. We can add variables like this and then create another string and call it a time of day, or I can delete this string, copy this, move it up to the top where we've already declared one string, and we can use a comma, and now this line reads name as a string and time of day as a string. These are two separate variables. Okay, so now we've got name as a string, and I'm going to come back down to this invocation of our method, and I'm going to say name equals greetings.getName. So anything that's returned in this method will be saved in this variable name, and the return value of this has to be a string because we've declared our name to be a string, and that's fine because we know our getName method returns a string. So what happens if we run this? Okay, there are no errors. There is one warning, and the reason we have a warning is we've declared a string called time of day, but we've not used it. So that's fine because we will go ahead and use that shortly. If we click on build and click rebuild solution, as long as we don't get errors here, then we're good to go in terms of we're good to run our program or application. There are no errors, it's just that one warning because of this guy over here, and we know about this. So I'm going to hit F5 and let's see what this does. Okay, so on the console it's saying please enter your name, and that text is taken from here, please enter your name. I'm going to enter my name, which is Tech Life. I'm going to hit return, and that's all our program does at the moment. So what happened? When we ran this program, as we all know, C# comes into main because main is the starting point of any C# program. It looked at this line of code and it said, okay, I'm going to allocate some space in memory for a string called name. I'm going to allocate some more space for a string called time of day. I'm going to come to this line of code and I'm going to totally ignore it because it's a comment, it's got 2 forward slashes. And then I'm going to come to here and I'm going to instantiate this class. So once that class is instantiated, C# looks at this line of code and says, okay, this line of code is calling something called getName. C# knows exactly what getName is because it's a method within this class, so the code jumps from here to here. Once the code is down here, again, more space is reserved in memory for a string called name, and then the console write line displays our message on the console. Once that once that message is displayed, then C# waits for input from the user, because we've got a read line, and read line allows us to enter values into a console. Once we enter those values into the console and hit return, then the value that we enter gets saved into this name. Once we have a value in this name, we return the value of name back up to the invocation. So the value that we capture here is returned in this return line back up to here, and is written into this string variable called name. And because we're not doing anything with this at the moment, then the program terminates. Okay. Cool. So let's continue building this, because at the moment it doesn't do anything, and I want this to actually perform some sort of meaningful actions. So I'm going to add a comment here and say maybe get a time of day, and I'm going to come back down here. We'll go past the get name method. So again, the get name method starts here and ends here. Our class starts here at these curly braces, and it ends here. So our methods have to sit within those braces. So I'm going to create another method here. I'm going to start off by declaring this as public. I'm going to say that it's going to return a string, and we can give it a name of greeting time, I think, and then we're going to use parentheses and the curly braces. Okay, so this is exactly the same as we did for our get name. We defined the access level, we defined the type, return type, and then we gave our method a name. We open and close the parentheses, and we didn't place any arguments within this parentheses, therefore we are not passing anything into this method, in terms of we're not passing any values into this method. Come on, Visual Studio is not cooperating with me, it seems to be jumping around all over the place. Anyway, okay, so here what we aim to do in this method is we are going to return a time of day. So if a user types in maybe 10:20 AM, then we're going to say return good morning. If a user types in anything after noon, then we're going to say good afternoon. And then if a user types in something after maybe 5:30, maybe just 5, then we're going to say good evening. So we're going to kick this off by let's declare a string. That's always a good start. If in doubt, declare a string. No. So time of day, and we always end a line with a semicolon. And then I'm going to prompt the user to enter, please enter time. So console dot write parentheses, double quotes, please enter time, enter the time. I'm going to put that, and again semicolon for this line, and I'm going to capture this, the value that the user enters, and we're going to capture it, we're going to save it in this string variable that we created. And the way we do that is time of day equals console dot read, and we're going to use read line. Okay, once we've got that, I'm going to use something called an if statement, and don't worry about the if statement just yet. I will do another video on the if statement and things like loops, like while loop, for loop, etc. This switch statement. All of those videos are going to come later, but for now I'm going to use the if statement. Don't worry about it, just concentrate on the fact that we are again declaring a method. So we're creating a method, we're describing what the method does. So once we create this method, it's a description of what something does, then we're in a position to invoke that method, i.e. instantiate the class that it sits in and use that method. So the if statement starts with the word if open parentheses and close parentheses, parentheses, and I'm going to use a decimal dot parse. And what this a decimal dot parse does is it allows us to convert one type of variable type into another. Decimal dot parse will attempt to convert something that's not of type decimal into type decimal, and the variable that we're hoping to convert into a decimal is this time of day variable, which we declared as string. So we're going to type in time of day here. So this is saying look at time of day and attempt to convert it into a decimal. And once we've got that time of day, a string converted into a decimal, I want to compare it to the value 12, and I'm going to say if the time of day is less than or equal to 12, then do whatever's in this set of curly braces. And all we need to do here is save a value of good morning to time of day. Time of day equals good morning, and again not forgetting the semicolon. So let's recap. I've used an if statement, and I'm saying if converting the time of day into a decimal is less than equal to 12, then do this. So we're saving a string back into time of day, which is a string type. So here it just does the conversion for this particular part of the code. Once it's converted it, it compares it. If this statement is true, then this code runs. If this statement is false, then this piece of code will not run. Okay, let's continue with this, because I'm gonna have two more greetings. So one obviously will be for afternoon, and the last one will be for evening. So I'm going to say else. Again, don't worry about if else. We will address the if statement in a separate video. So I'm going to say if decimal dot parse time of day, and this time it's going to be greater than 12, greater than 12. I'm going to pull this back slightly, otherwise I'm going to run out of space. So if time of day is greater than 12 and decimal dot parse time of day is less than or less than or equal to 17, which is 5 o'clock. If that statement is true, then run whatever code is in these curly braces, and I'm gonna simply save the value of good afternoon, good afternoon, and we're saving good afternoon to time of day. And then we're going to have one more else statement for our evening greeting. So here we're saying if the first statement is false, come down to the second statement. If that's false, then just do the last statement, which is going to simply say good evening. And this is not a bulletproof piece of code, but the only reason I'm doing this is to show you methods, how to declare a method, how to invoke the method. So that's the only thing that you should really be taking concentrating on. The if statement, don't worry about it. As I say, we're going to look at. So I'm saying time of day here is going to be good evening. Good evening. Nope. Good evening. And as we know, all methods, if they have a return type defined, then we have to use the keyword return. So we're going to, oops, and we have to ensure that we use the right case. If I use a capital R for return, it's going to, actually Visual Studio is very clever. It converts it back down to the correct word. So we're returning time of day, and we're going to use a semicolon. Okay, so rebuild solution. keep an eye on the errors. There should be 0 errors. We still have 1 warning, and we know why we have that 1 warning. So at the top we declared time of day, which is of type string, and we haven't yet used it. So we just did here saying you've declared something, you haven't used it, maybe it's a good idea to delete it, but we know we're going to use it, and we're going to use it pretty much straight away now, because we are able to invoke this method that we've just created, and we're going to save the value of whatever greeting time returns to this time of day variable. So here we can type in time of day equals, and we don't have to instantiate the class again, and because we've already instantiated it and we have a reference to an instance of the test method. So if I type in greetings and dot, now we should be able to see not only the getName method that we created, but also the greeting time method that we've just created. And if I tab this and use the parentheses, we are invoking this greeting time method now by making this greeting time call. So when C# comes to this line of code, it's going to come to here and say, okay, I know what this is. This is a method. It's in the greetings class. So I'll come down to this a method here called greeting time, and then it will run the code that's within here. And let's see that in action. I don't see any errors. Okay, F5 to run. And the first prompt is please enter your name. My name is TechLife. If I hit return, it says please enter the time. And the reason I passed the string value to a decimal is because time obviously has 2 parts to it. So it can be either 10 or 1020 or 1045, and if I hit return here, nothing happens because all of this code gets run. The values get assigned to this variable, and then C# ends the program. Okay, let's make this program actually do something in terms of output. So if we go back up to the main method, we're in a position now to output a message to the screen because we have the name and we have the greeting. The name gets stored in this variable and the greeting gets stored in this variable, and we could simply just type in something like this is going to be a comment, and I'm going to say display greeting. And we could do something as simple as console.write and then name concatenate, and I'm going to concatenate a space and then concatenate time of day. Okay, if I take this out and let's see what happens. So I'm going to simply concatenate the name and to the time of day. I'm going to add a console .read key, otherwise the program will just run quickly and we won't see the output. Okay, let's see what happens here. F5 to run. And so C# is prompting us for a name, and it's still set live. If I hit return, it wants us to enter a time. I'm going to say 10:20 in the morning. Okay, so it said tech live, good morning, which is correct, but it hasn't left a space between tech live and good morning. That's why we have to actually physically add a space. So, and the way we do that, a space is simply if we have two, if we have these inverted commas, that's simply seen as a string, and so we concatenate this space to the two variables. And if we run this again, F5, again it's still set live. Let's say it's 11 o'clock in the morning now. It says tech live, good morning. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna change this code slightly because we're talking about methods and invoking methods and creating methods. So I'm gonna select both of these lines of code. I'm going to copy these and delete them from there. We're going to come down to just past our greeting time method, which ends there, and we're going to create another method here, and we're going to call this a display greeting. We're going to start this off by saying it's a public method. And this method is not going to return anything, so it's going to be void, and we're going to give the method a name, and we're going to call that display and greetings. Actually, display greeting, open and close parentheses. And now we're going to actually pass values into this method, and the values we're going to pass are the name and also the time of day. And both of those are string. So I'm going to type in string name, comma, string and time of day, time of day. I've got the curly braces in place. And I'm going to paste in the code that we had at the top. Clean this up slightly. So we've defined another method, and it's called display greeting. We have a squiggly. It doesn't seem to like this. Okay, silly me, time of day. That's where it's really important for you to take note and keep in mind that C# is case sensitive. I had a small letter D there for time of day, and it wasn't able to recognize the fact that that is a variable. So this is the time of day that we need, and there's no more squigglies. Okay, so we've defined another method. Now we've got three methods. The third method, all this does is it will display the greeting, and this is slightly different than the first two in that we are actually passing it arguments. We're passing it variables. Both of those variables are of type string, And the way we pass these is when we invoke this method, we will within the parentheses we will enter the names of these variables. So if we go right to the top again, here again we don't need to instantiate the class because it's already been instantiated, and we have a reference to the class and it's called greetings. So if I type in greetings here and I use the dot notation, we can see all the methods and properties that are available to us, and the one we've just created is called display greeting, which is right at the top here. If we tap this, we have to open and close a parenthesis, and let me just do that slowly. So if I open the parenthesis, now Visual Studio is really helpful because it's saying display greeting will take two arguments, and both of those arguments are of type string. One is called name and one is called time of day. You don't need to remember what arguments you need to pass in because Visual Studio is clever enough to tell you what you need to put between these two parentheses. So we're going to place the name and we're going to place the time of day into this invocation of the display greetings method. So we're going to just type in name, comma, and then time of day, and then we're going to end this line by using a semicolon. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what we've done here. We instantiated a class, we invoked the getName method, and we didn't place any values in the parentheses because there were no arguments that we needed to pass into the getName. We did the same with greeting time. Again, we didn't need to instantiate the class because it had already been done, and we already had a reference to the objects within the class. So we simply use greetings dot and then the name of the method. Lastly, greetings dot display greeting we used here, and we know that we had to pass in arguments, and those arguments we passed in are these variables which are of type a string. So if we come down, these parameters are both of type string. That's why when we invoke the display greeting method, we have to pass in string arguments. This is a string and this is a string. Okay, let's run this one more time. Let's do a quick build first. So we go up to build, rebuild solution. No errors, no warnings. F5 to run. Please enter your name. Still Tech Life. Please enter the time. So we're going to say 11:15 in the morning. Tech Life, good morning. That's the output. Excellent. Let's run it again just to test out the afternoon. So F5 again. Tech Life. And now it's 13:10. Tech Life, good afternoon. And one last time. F5. Tech Life. And it's 1800. Good evening, Tech Life. Cool. We've seen this running. There are no errors. This was a short tutorial on methods and how to firstly declare a method, and secondly how to use that method by invoking that method. we looked at how to return values from a method, and we looked at how to define the return types of methods. We also looked at how to define methods whereby they have values passed into them. These are arguments that are getting passed into our method. And we had a quick look at the if statement, but as I say, I keep repeating myself, we're going to look at this at a later stage during this course of short tutorials. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this video up now. Hopefully you have found this tutorial on methods educational. If so, please do consider subscribing and hitting the notification so you don't miss the next part. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you very much.